meters. That's the height of the limestone pillar rising from a valley in Georgia. On top sits a small church built by ascetic monks back in the 9th century. Over 100 years later, it still stands. This isn't an abandoned church. Since 1993, a monk named Maxim Kavtaradze has lived permanently on top of the pillar. Each week, he only comes down 2 or 3 times to pray with the faithful waiting below. To this day, he's lived up there for over 20 years, almost completely cut off from the ground. What makes a person give up life on the ground to spend decades living atop a precarious rock spire? Does this place hold some special spiritual power? What keeps thousands of pilgrims coming back year after year? Before we find the answer, let's go through 9 other homes. In one, people have to carry a gun out the door every morning. In another, an entire community has lived inside a volcanic rock formation for 7 centuries. Let's start with a town deep in the Arctic, where predators outnumber people. One winter morning, the sky is still pitch black as midnight, and that darkness will last for 4 months straight. Before stepping out the door, the first thing to do isn't putting on a warm coat. It's checking the large caliber rifle kept right beside the doorway. This is Longyearbyen, the northernmost permanently inhabited settlement in the world, located deep within Norway's Svalbard archipelago, only about 1,300 kilometers from the North Pole. Svalbard is home to roughly 3,000 polar bears, far outnumbering the town's population of around 2,400 people. Because of this, an almost absolute rule has stood for decades. Anyone leaving the town's boundaries, even by just a few hundred meters, is required to carry a weapon and know how to use it. The polar bears here have learned to approach residential areas in search of food, and unexpected encounters can unfold in a matter of seconds. But bears aren't the most frightening thing here. Beneath the town lies a layer of permafrost ground that has remained frozen for thousands of years and almost never fully thaws. This ice preserves almost everything buried within it, including bacteria and viruses that have lain dormant for decades. For this reason, burying the dead in Longyearbyen has been completely banned. Anyone who is terminally ill or passes away must be transported back to mainland Norway for burial. Even the houses themselves must yield to this permafrost. All buildings are constructed on raised support pillars so that the warmth inside doesn't melt the frozen ground beneath. Living in Longyearbyen means accepting a trade-off between 2 extremes. 4 months sunk in endless darkness, and 4 months of light that never fades, all while staying constantly alert for a predator that could appear right outside the window at any moment. Yet living alongside the Arctic's largest predator still isn't the outer limit of recklessness. There is a house suspended entirely in mid-air, held up by nothing but a single concrete column. Seen from the base of the hill, it looks like nothing so much as a flying saucer attempting to land on a steep hillside on the outskirts of Los Angeles. This is the Chemosphere, one of the strangest and boldest architectural works of the 20th century, designed by architect John Lautner in 1960. When surveying this plot of land, Lautner was confronted with terrain that seemed almost impossible to build on, a hillside sloping at 45 degrees. He had two options: level the entire hill, which would be both costly and destructive to the natural landscape, or raise the whole house on a single support point. He chose the latter, a reinforced concrete column 9 meters tall, at a cost of only about $30,000. But the price of that economy was a constant sense of unease. The entire weight of the house, along with everyone inside it, rested on exactly one load-bearing point. No secondary support, no backup plan. On a night with strong winds, you can feel faint vibrations running through the floor, a reminder that you are suspended in mid-air, not standing on solid ground. Engineers insist the structure is completely safe, having been tested over the decades, including through minor earthquakes in California. But the psychological experience of living in a house with no foundation in the conventional sense is an entirely different matter. Today, the Chemosphere is valued at more than $3 million and still has an owner living in it. The house has appeared in numerous Hollywood films and has become an architectural icon studied by experts around the world. A single column was enough to hold up an entire house. But in the Netherlands, someone went even further, suspending an entire row of apartments in mid-air without any support at all. In the Netherlands, a housing company for the elderly once faced a problem that seemed to have no solution. They were commissioned to build 100 apartments, but when designing them, architects discovered that minimum light and spacing codes only allowed for about 87. The remaining 13 simply had nowhere to stand. So the team came up with a bold fix: bolt those 13 units straight onto the building's north side, a spot with no direct sunlight, deemed essentially unusable, and let them jut out into thin air. The result was the WoZoCo housing complex. Rows of boxy apartment units appear to be stuck loosely onto the main building, hanging suspended right above the sidewalk and parking lot below. Living inside one of those apartments, looking out through the kitchen window, reveals nothing but empty space below your feet. No ground, no supporting balcony, just air. And for anyone walking directly underneath, looking up to see an entire apartment hanging overhead isn't exactly a comfortable experience either. Yet this structure is entirely legal, having passed full structural certification under European standards, and it has been operating safely for many years. Dozens of elderly residents in the Netherlands are now living quite peacefully inside those very suspended boxes. Concrete and steel can float in the air thanks to modern engineering. But hundreds of years earlier, nature had already done the very same thing with rock, without a single technical blueprint. Tucked away in a narrow gorge in the province of Cádiz, southern Spain, there is a town where many houses don't really have a roof of their own in the true sense of the word. This is Setenil de las Bodegas, where hundreds of houses are built, pressed directly against massive sandstone outcrops jutting out from the cliffside, acting as giant natural overhangs that shelter the entire street below. The name Setenil is believed to derive from the Latin phrase Setenil, referring to 7 failed attempts by invading armies to conquer this natural fortress. The rugged terrain, dominated by these enormous rock formations, turned the place into an almost impregnable stronghold. Living beneath these rock overhangs was at first a sound survival strategy. Summer heat in southern Spain can exceed 40 degrees Celsius, while beneath rock layers dozens of meters thick, the temperature stays cool year-round, a natural air conditioning system that costs no energy at all. But that shelter comes with a quiet threat of its own. Residents live directly beneath millions of tons of rock that have hung suspended for thousands of years, held in place only by their own natural geological structure, with no artificial reinforcement whatsoever. Walking through the narrow streets where the rock ceiling nearly grazes the top of your head, many visitors describe a suffocating sensation, as if the massive rock above were about to come crashing down at any moment. Scientists confirm that these rock masses have remained stable for many millennia, and the short-term risk of collapse is very low. But the real problem lies in the town's ability to respond if it ever happened. The narrow gorge leaves almost no alternative emergency escape route. A large rock falling at a critical junction could cut off the entire area for hours, even days. The question this raises is, if rock can hang suspended for centuries to serve as a roof, could it also become an entire, complete place to live? In the remote East Azerbaijan region of Iran, tucked away in a rugged mountain valley, lies one of the steepest and strangest settlements still existing in the world today. This is Kandovan, home to about 117 households, living inside massive cone-shaped rock formations formed from fossilized volcanic ash over thousands of years following ancient eruptions. Locals call these rock cones Karen. Unlike most settlements in the world, homes in Kandovan use no bricks, no cement, no steel frames. Residents carve directly into the core of each volcanic ash rock to create living space. The entire safety of a house depends solely on the natural durability of the fossilized rock, with no artificial reinforcement whatsoever. Some of these rock cones rise nearly 40 meters high, with apartments carved into multiple interconnected floors within the same rock mass. The stone walls, nearly 2 meters thick, provide remarkable natural insulation, cool in summer, warm in winter, with no need for any air conditioning. Connecting these stone houses is a system of open-air stone staircases carved straight into the mountainside, with no handrails and no barriers. Winter in Kandovan lasts nearly 6 months, and heavy snowfall often turns these steep stone paths into dangerous natural ice rinks. During the heaviest snowstorms, the entire village can be completely cut off from the outside world for days at a time. And yet, despite every danger posed by the terrain and the harsh climate, this community has persisted here for more than 700 years, turning a seemingly uninhabitable volcanic rock mass into a lasting home across many generations. Just as people once carved deep into volcanic rock to escape the cold, they are equally capable of digging deep into the earth to escape the scorching sky above. In one of the most remote and harshest desert regions of South Australia, surface temperatures in summer can exceed 50 degrees Celsius even in the shade. Hot enough that stepping outside at midday without careful preparation is almost the equivalent of inviting heat stroke. This is Coober, Pedy, a town where most residents have chosen a radical solution, digging their entire homes deep into the ground. Seen from the surface, the town looks like nothing more than a desolate red wasteland, dotted with hundreds of white ventilation pipes jutting out of the earth like submarine periscopes. But descend the stairs below, and you'll be met with an unexpectedly luxurious living space. High-ceilinged living rooms, indoor swimming pools, even billiard rooms, all carved directly out of the sandstone, veined with shades of ochre, pale pink and cream. Coober, Pedy is also the opal mining capital of the world, accounting for more than 70% of global production. As a result, the ground beneath the town is riddled with tens of thousands of abandoned mining tunnels. The real danger begins with greed. More than a few families, upon spotting the glint of precious stone right in a bedroom wall, kept digging deeper, sometimes straight through the very rock pillars supporting their homes. The result is hundreds of thousands of tons of rock overhead, left without support. A single small tremor is enough to cause an entire underground mansion to collapse in an instant. Residents also face fine silica dust from the surrounding sandstone, which can accumulate in the lungs over time and cause chronic respiratory illness if ventilation isn't properly maintained. No sunlight, no birdsong, only an almost absolute silence. The price that thousands of residents have accepted in order to survive in one of the harshest regions on the planet. Some choose to escape the heat by burrowing underground. Others choose to confront the water head-on, building their homes in the middle of a raging river, and accepting that it will sweep them away again and again. In Lake Norway in Benin, West Africa, there is a city with no roads at all. All movement, trade, and schooling take place on the water. This is Ganvié, often called the Venice of Africa, with nearly 3,000 teakwood stilt houses standing on posts, driven deep into the mud at the bottom of the lake, serving about 30,000 residents who have lived there continuously for more than 400 years. This floating city originated from a shrewd survival strategy. The Tofinu people, when pursued by hostile tribes, discovered that their attackers dared not venture into deep water for religious reasons. So they built an entire city right on the surface of the lake, turning the dangerous water into a natural defensive fortress. Children here learned to swim and paddle a canoe at almost the same time they learned to walk. Weaving through thousands of closely packed stilt houses is the only way to get to school, to the market, or to visit relatives. A single misjudged paddle stroke in the dark, or a sudden storm that raises the water level, and the risk of capsizing is always present, especially for young children and the elderly. The Ganvié floating market, where hundreds of dugout canoes gather every morning, is one of the most photographed sights in West Africa. But behind that lively scene, the household waste of 30,000 people flows directly into the very lake they live on, creating a persistent public health problem that has spanned generations. 400 years is how long it took one city to learn to live in harmony with water. The next house, however, is anything but harmonious. It has been swept away no fewer than 7 times. In the fast-flowing Drina River in western Serbia, there stands a tiny wooden house perched precariously on a rock that rises only a few meters above the water. No bridge, no path leading to the shore. For anyone who has ever spent a night in that house, the danger doesn't lie in whether the house will be swept away, but in whether they can notice the rising water in time before the swift current cuts off any way back to the shore. The story began in 1968 when a group of local young people, including a young man named Milija Manic, nicknamed Gika, chose the rock in the middle of the river as a place to rest and gather. At first, it was just a few planks laid over the rock. A floor called for a windbreak. A windbreak called for a roof. That's how the first house took shape, with no blueprint, just wooden pegs and rope. But that very same autumn, the river rose suddenly and swept the entire structure away in a single night. They rebuilt it the following summer. The river carried it away again. That standoff has lasted more than half a century. As of 2019, the house had been destroyed at least 7 times, and each time the locals rebuilt it in exactly the same spot. In one version, they even designed hinged walls that would swing open to let floodwater pass straight through, a solution that worked for a few seasons until a drifting log slammed into it and shattered everything in a matter of seconds. The most remarkable part of this story isn't the engineering, but the almost irrational persistence of the people behind it. Milija Manic, now a grey-haired old man, still regularly gathers with friends to retrieve whatever wood survives whenever a flood sweeps the house away, waiting for the water to recede before rebuilding it all over again. The house on the Drina River is not an ancient wonder. It is a symbol of an endless standoff, one where the river always wins, yet the people have never truly given up. Being swept away 7 times still isn't the outer limit of human recklessness with terrain. Some structures choose to avoid the ground entirely, rising instead atop rock pillars hundreds of meters high. In the vast Thessaly plain of Greece, dozens of massive sandstone pillars rise straight into the sky, some reaching nearly 400 meters. On top of nearly 20 of these pillars, monasteries have stood firm for more than 600 years. This is Meteora, which in Greek means suspended in the air. Since the 14th century, monks came here to escape the invasions taking place down on the plain. But building monasteries atop these near vertical rock pillars with no mechanical tools whatsoever was an almost impossible task. For centuries, the only answer was human effort. Monks climbed nearly vertical rope ladders, carrying bricks on their backs, facing the risk of plunging into the abyss after a single slip of the hand. Even more terrifying was the way people traveled afterward, a net woven from rope, hoisted up by a hand-operated pulley. No safety brake, no backup line. One detail has been passed down through generations. The single rope connecting the monastery to the ground below was only replaced once it had actually snapped, because the monks believed that proactively replacing it before it broke would be a sign of insufficient faith in God. Living at that height also meant being cut off entirely from any groundwater source. The monasteries depended completely on rainwater cisterns carved into the rock, and a single unusually dry season could push the whole community into a water crisis. Today, stone staircases and modern suspension bridges have replaced most of the old dangerous rope systems. But many of the trails still remain barely wide enough for one person, running right along the edge of the cliff with no railing. The great Meteoron monastery still preserves the original rope net, along with the remains of monks who once lived and died on that cliff face. But nearly 20 monasteries leaning on one another atop a mountain is one thing. Living in complete solitude on just a single rock pillar, exactly 40 meters tall, is an entirely different story. Do you remember the 40-meter limestone pillar in Georgia mentioned at the beginning of the video? This is where the answer is finally revealed. In the Katskhi River Valley, in the Imereti region of western Georgia, a massive limestone rock formation rises straight into the sky, completely separated from any surrounding terrain, looking like the finger of an ancient god pointing toward the heavens. On its summit, a plot of land no more than about 150 square meters holds a small church and a tiny hermit cell, standing there since around the 9th century. Centuries ago, the Stoilites, ascetic monks of the stylite tradition climbed to the top of this near-vertical rock pillar to live completely separated from the secular world, believing that the higher they rose, the closer they came to God. After the last monks died, the pillar was abandoned for centuries. In 1993, Maxim Kavtaradze, a former tower crane operator, decided to become a monk and revive that very tradition. For years afterward, using nothing but a simple hand winch, he and a small group of volunteers hauled brick after brick to the summit to build a monk's cell and restore the ancient church. The only way up remains a rusted iron ladder bolted to the rock face, with no protective cage and no safety harness, a route locals call the stairway to heaven. He lived at that precarious height for more than 20 years, coming down the mountain only a few times a week to pray. In winter, when ice coated the metal steps, he had to rely entirely on a pulley system to have bread and water hauled up from below. Since 2018, a decree by the Georgian Orthodox Church has banned visitors from climbing the pillar, allowing access only to male monks. Women have never once been permitted to set foot on the summit. No demons, no supernatural legend. Just one real human being who chose of his own free will to spend 2 full decades living on the edge between earth and sky for the sake of his own faith. 10 homes. 10 times humans have stood on the fragile line between life and death. Not because they were forced into a corner, but because they chose it themselves. But something worth pondering more than any number, height, or wind speed. Most of these places aren't forgotten ruins. Right now, as you're reading this, people are still living there, cooking a meal, rocking a child to sleep, lighting a candle, or quietly praying, in places most of us wouldn't even dare look down from. The real question isn't how extreme a place humans can survive in. It's how much we're willing to give up just to feel what it truly means to have a home. Leave a comment and tell us which of these 10 homes surprised you the most, and whether you dare spend even one night there. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because this journey into humanity's strangest homes is far from over. See you in the next video.